Welcome to another exciting episode of the Late Night Hour, broadcasting from our secret, undisclosed, underground bunker location. The voice of freedom, and a warm welcome to you. Here on the Late Night Hour, we explore the topics not found on television.
You're listening to the Late Night Hour.
For some people who maybe have a little less experience than others, the politics of America brings a thrill. It's easy to get caught up watching the news, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. It's easy to become like a scoreboard keeper. You watch the news each day and you keep score. You become emotionally attached to one of the major political parties. You get up every morning, bring up your newspapers. Well, those aren't around anymore, but you bring up your 10 or 20 websites and you look at the news and you celebrate. Because today Trump won the argument. Tomorrow, the Democrats won the argument. And it's easy to get sucked up in this political theater. Each and every day, the news reports on the topics that are tossed around to get an emotional response out of you. And so when you're less experienced, I don't like to use younger because there are young people who have caught on that the entire system's fake. So if you've caught on, you're not so emotionally attached to the daily news, and you realize you don't really have to dig in each and every day to the scorecard. And you can relax and only seek out the really important things that might come out in the news. The reality is the mainstream media would prefer to give you a lot of superficial topics, celebrity, sports. They are forced to report on some important topics just from the sheer news, the sheer outrageous issues that come and go. They can't keep a lid on everything, so they then end up spinning it. But if it was up to the mainstream media, they would not report on any topics that are actually meaningful. Our national debt. We hear about that, but who do we owe the money to exactly? And don't we collect IRS taxes? Don't we collect enough money to just pay that off? What? We can only pay a little portion of the interest? So the people we owe this national debt to have a perpetual debt that we never can remove, and we collect all these taxes from every American citizen, and we can just barely pay the interest? Man, I'd like to be one of the owners of this country with this perpetual debt engine. and everybody working for them, like a hamster in the little treadmill. Work, pay your taxes, goes to the super elite as interest. And the principal is never reduced. In fact, if you look at the national debt charge, it's just going up year after year after year. They just need a reason to keep raising that debt. The terrorists are going to get us. We have to prepare for Russia or for China. We need these enemies. The best enemies money can buy. Saudi Arabia, they're outrageous. We have to build up our national defense. We have people all over the world starving. We need more welfare. We need more entitlement programs and free education for everybody. You see, it doesn't matter who is elected, who holds the office, as long as they play the game, as long as they keep raising the national debt, keeping all Americans in the perpetual debt system, collecting more and more taxes, and paying that interest, as long as the principal is never reduced. Now, we all know that sooner or later, when 50%, 70%, 80% of your earnings are taxed, the system is going to collapse. And that's when they bring out a reset. They call it a reset. And basically, they create new bills and new money systems, and it drops you down to a lower level of poverty. But the debt's gone. And then, of course, they build the debt back on the new money system. So they have a plan if it becomes too obvious that too much of your money is going to this wealthy elite that runs the world. And we pay interest. And that's why the television mainstream media is never going to tell you who is this national debt owed to. They hide that. They don't want to discuss it. They don't want to discuss how real wages have not increased, but rent and energy and food has been increasing significantly. And you're buying those potato chips that are predominantly a bag of air with a few chips down at the bottom. I'm almost ready to boycott potato chips because it's just like buying air in a bag. And I mean, it's just going to keep going. We get like 3 chips in a giant bag of Lay's chips. I'm using Lay's as an example. Many of these corporations, rather than expose inflation to you, they play with the packaging. The cookies and crackers get smaller, like miniature people are eating them. Pretty soon you're going to need tweezers to eat your Nabisco cookies or crackers. At some point, it becomes obvious, and we all say, I think you're scamming me. I'm paying $5 for this bag of crackers, and I have to eat each one with a tweezer. They're so small. I think I'm getting ripped off. And that's another part of the inflation game. The price remains the same, but the product gets smaller, gets reduced. And of course, it drives you nuts. You're crazy. You're got this grocery cart with all these empty bags of air in them. And then when you go to check out, they have a camera in your face like you're going to steal the bag of air. So this whole system is just getting crazier and crazier. Okay, so getting back, you don't really need to watch the mainstream media. It's generally a waste of time. Just go find something else, something more fun, something funner, something more enjoyable to do on your spare time. Turn off the television until they pass a law that requires you to keep the television on, like in the book 1984, George Orwell. Watching television becomes mandatory because they need to brainwash you each and every day of your life. But right now, you simply turn it off. Don't worry about the mainstream media. And then you find a show, hopefully like ours, the Late Night Hour. If there's anything important that you should know about, I'm going to cover it in the first 5 minutes of this show. So I hope you enjoy our program and you'll come back and you might flip it on regularly. It's recorded so you can just listen on demand. And if there's anything really important in the news, I'm going to let you know about it in the first 5 minutes of the show. We monitor hundreds of information and data points. And if there was anything really important, I'm going to know about it, and I'm going to share that with you. And that's why our broadcast varies a little from every day of the week to once a week. It just depends what's important, what's out there in the news. And it's been relatively calm. So we like to relax ourselves, grab our favorite beverage. Down here in the bunker, the beverages stay ice cold. So it's really nice that way. And we encourage you to turn off the mainstream media and then grab your favorite beverage. You don't even have to watch our show, right? You can just sit back, calm, tranquility, relaxed, and you can listen to me rant away and bring to you anything important. I'm going to get a new beverage and be right back in 1 minute.
Into a midnight haze. She will follow you. She will follow you. She will follow you. She will follow along.
We thank you for supporting the Late Night Hour, commercial-free radio. To share your best theory, give us a call at 515-602-9663.
You're listening to The Late Night Hour with Alex Abrams.
And so a shout out to those listening here in America, Norway, Germany, Italy, Vietnam. Those are some of our top audiences. So a shout out to you. Thank you for joining us here at the Late Night Hour. And we are an international show. And we appreciate you and spreading the word, telling others about the Late Night Hour. We are here. We are dedicated to keeping you better informed. So people will come up and then they'll ask me quite often, they'll say, who runs the world? And it's a very deep and complex story. But looking at it objectively, you would probably be wise to research history. And you would find since the 1700s, there was an organization called the Society of Jesus, also known as the Jesuits. And I would say the Jesuits are the New World Order. They are running everything from a strategic viewpoint. So I guess I would say they don't own the world, but they run it. They are the operational arm. And a lot of people think the New World Order is coming. And what I'm telling you is it's always been here since the 1700s. And the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. And you're thinking, how does the Jesuits connect with the Catholic Church? And again, this is a very complex topic, but here on the Late Night Hour, I just give you the 101s, the basics that you need in order to understand the workings of the world. And so, let's go back to the Pope dressed in white. What you don't see is the Society of Jesus, which is led by the, if you know, come into the chat room and share that with us, or you can give us a call at 515-602-9663. The Catholic Church is split in two. Most people don't understand that. You have kind of the front. They, to some extent, preach religion, Christianity, Judaism. They would be considered the Roman Catholic Church, the Orthodox, stringent version of Catholicism. And so that's what most people see, the white Pope. But there is another half of the Catholic Church, and that is referred to the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. And their leader is called the Black Pope, having nothing to do with race. White and black, the checkerboard, the same checkerboard featured in the Freemasons. And so there is this entire connection between the Catholic Church, the Jesuits, the traditional name, the Society of Jesus, and Freemasonry, all intertwined. But getting back to the topic of why does the Black Pope and the Jesuits, why are they the operators of the New World Order? Because when you look back at history, the Jesuits, also known as the Society of Jesus, they were already in all types of countries all over the world. They were getting a foothold. And when you research the Jesuits, you'll bump into a couple of things. First, the Knights Templars. But most researchers would tell you that basically the Knights Templars were the army of the Jesuits. So the Jesuits, the Society of Jesus, these priests, they didn't really like to fight, so they outsourced that to the Knights Templars. And it became pretty integrated. And so that was done, and they went to all these different countries all over the world to do a couple of things. Number one, to steal the gold from all these different countries. They stole the Incas' gold and the Mayas' gold and gold down in Peru and gold all over the world. They took their armies, the Knights Templars, in, and they would conquer the tribes of the different lands. They would make them mine gold in slave labor, and they would pour it into Jesuit ingots. And so a lot of people will also say, well, the Knights Templars were the first bankers, the first globalist bankers. Well, they were, but they, of course, took direction and integrated with the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, the Black Pope. Call him I think they call him the Black Pope General, something like that. So you watch the Catholic Church on television. They never tell you about the Black Pope. They only tell you about the White Pope. And so you're here thinking, wow, the Catholics seem pretty mild, and they have their white robes, and they tell us how our morals are all messed up, and for a few $1,000s I can confess my sins and confessional and come out clean. It's a nice system. You give them money, they bless you, and you are forgiven of your sins, free to go out raping, murdering, killing until your next confessional comes. I'm exaggerating. There's a lot of very nice, well-meaning Catholics, but most of them don't even know the history of the Black Pope versus the White Pope. And it's not surprising, since the Black Pope, the Jesuits and their army, the Knights Templars, collected all this gold. They became more and more powerful. And at some point, some of the different monarchs, like in Portugal, Austria, Hungary, Spain, they decided they would suppress the Society of Jesus. So you had what's called in history the suppression of the Jesuits. And you'll have a tough time finding books that tell you why. Why were they suppressing the Society of Jesus? Now, they weren't suppressing the White Pope, the Catholic Church. They were only suppressing the Society of Jesus. That's because the Society of Jesus and their outsourced Knights Templars army were out pillaging the world, getting all the gold, becoming more powerful, becoming the first New World Order, very international, able to align with different countries. So if one monarch rose up against the Jesuits, they could get other countries to attack them. Doesn't that sound familiar today? We have many Jesuits. Just think of Bill Clinton, Georgetown University. Many of these universities are Jesuit institutions. And so we are still, I believe, under the same old world, new world order, where the Jesuits run basically every country. And every country has a central bank that controls the currency and the flow of money. just like the old days where the Jesuits and the Knights Templar armies controlled the flow of capital on an international basis. That's why you have all these ships that were transporting gold bars all over the world, and many of them sunk. That's why you have treasure hunters looking for the Jesuit gold. You'll find many looking for the Jesuit gold in many countries. The Jesuits obviously would lose or bury or hide some of their gold bars. And there's probably quite a bit of it around to this day. But the system is the same. So we can expect to find at the highest levels of government in every country fingerprints of Jesuit-connected leaders. And I haven't spent a great deal of time researching this, but generally I think other people have researched it, and that's what you would see. You would see people educated in Jesuit institutions who are leading many of these countries. And if the United States gets out of line, then the Jesuits and their agents running other countries will attack. And the same game they played since the 1700s. Now, here's where it gets a little messier. I said the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, control the world. Not necessarily do they own the world. They may be the middlemen, and behind the scenes is the real cabal, the real owners of the world. And they own, say, most of the hard gold bars. They are not billionaires. Billionaires are for public consumption. These people or families would be trillionaires, and they control the Jesuits. And the Jesuits work for them. And so I would say there's probably not that many, less than a dozen individuals. But when I say individuals, it can also be a family name. The one you often hear about is the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds, there's many relatives, I think a couple hundred. So again, when I say the Rothschilds own the world, they sit then behind the Jesuit operational layer. And so you probably have, I say, under a dozen family names that are behind this Jesuit layer. And so, you know, it might be the royal family of England. Rothschilds would be one. And there would probably be others. Now, you're saying, why are you telling me all this on the late night hour? Because you have to understand, like, this history of the white pope and the black pope and their outsourced army, the Knights Templars, how they were going all over the world collecting gold bars. Christopher Columbus, a perfect example. His ships flew the Knights Templar cross. The Nazis had the Knights Templar cross. These symbols are used repeatedly. And so here we are today, and we're really still under the same system. And to their credit, the Jesuits were the first group to go out and conquer in all these countries through their cozy relationship with the Knights Templar armies, which were the mercenaries, essentially. Now, you'll hear about a lot of other organizations like the Freemasons and the Knights of Malta and all these different groups, but none of them really had the footprint of the Jesuits. the Society of Jesus. Because the other thing they did when they were conquering all these countries and stealing their gold, they always said they were teaching the gospel. That's the cover. We're going into the Yucatan, where the Mayans live, and we're going to convert them to Catholicism. We're going to spread the good word. Here we go. We're going to spread the good word and the gospel of Jesus. We're at the Society of Jesus. And by the way, we want you to mine that gold and melt it into gold bars for us while we educate you. So that's the way the game was played. And they would probably convince the monarchs like the Queen of Spain, who funded the Knights Templar Christopher Columbus to go to the New World, and they would melt the gold down and send a little portion back to the Queen of Spain, keeping the rest, hiding the rest. Sometimes you hear about their hiding spots, like the Oak Island treasure that supposedly Knights Templar gold bars that they're searching for. And so, you know, the Society of Jesus, the Black Pope, the Jesuits, they were in business for themselves. They'd even get the monarchs to fund their mercenary excursions, like the Queen of Spain, who funded Christopher Columbus. I'm sorry, Queen of Spain. We didn't find any gold in the New World, but we did give you some nice spices. And you see, the Jesuits and the Society of Jesus have always been more and more about gold bars than they have the gospel of Jesus. It was just convenient cover. And so it's not surprising that we have Catholicism in all these countries, because this has been going on since the 1700s. The spreading of the gospel, which is the slave mining and harvesting of gold ingots. And so you have to understand all of this, or else you're going to get too upset. When we come back, I'm going to continue and make a few more links for you so that you can kind of understand the big picture at play here. We'll be back in just a minute. We invite you to join our community of freedom-loving listeners. Connect to our social media by visiting thelatenight.hour.com.
You're listening to The Late Night Hour with Alex Abrams.
And so the Pope in the Catholic Church has been in the news a lot, and he's becoming more and more radical. Some of his own bishops are speaking out against the liberal-minded Pope. But I think they all really are controlled by the Black Pope, the one you don't see. The shadow. And the Knights Templars are still around. They're now called the intelligence community. They are the modern day Knights Templars, the mercenaries for the Black Pope and the Jesuits. And what the Jesuits discovered is that they would take control of every facet of a particular philosophy. Let me explain that a little bit. Each person faces economic philosophies, religious philosophies, and racial philosophies. Those are probably the main three: race, economics, religion, maybe a few others. And what the Jesuits discovered is that they could take control of the entire spectrum along that pillar. So if we talk about religion, because that's an easy one to understand, the Jesuits would take over every religion in the spectrum. So obviously, their main religion would have been the Catholic Church. But there is a lot of evidence that not only did the Jesuits take over other religions, they created them. So they would create Islam. The Jesuits would create Hinduism, Buddhism. Now, they would create a good story to come up with that creation, that the Hindu came from the Far East and the Buddhists came from Tibet. So, they always had a good story to make up. But what did I tell you about the Jesuits being international? They were all over the world. They sent Jesuits to spread the gospel, harvest gold. They were all over the world, and they were easily in a position to create different religions. And the facts back this up. Researchers have found evidence that the Jesuits created Islam. So they kind of remain hidden, the Jesuits. But the Catholic Church is opposed to Islam. So you see, they create or they take over all the religions in the spectrum. They create some. This would continue in modern times. Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, Scientology. So the religions start to take a cult-like form, not necessarily all traditional religions, but they're still in the spectrum. The Jesuits create, or let's say they steal and improve upon Freemasonry. And so, that's a big arm. So you've got to look at the Jesuits as the head of the octopus. One big arm is the Catholic Church, another one is Islam, another one is Freemasonry, and the list goes on for the arms of the octopus. And what's the point? The point is they don't care which one you, as an individual, subscribe to. They all have the same head, the Jesuit Black Pope. And so they don't care if you join the Catholic Church, or you join Freemasonry, or you join the Mormons or the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Moonies. All of these little cult religious organizations, if they can get enough members, regardless what they call them, the Jesuits will nurture, invest their gold bars in to help bring that religion or that religious philosophy along. And so when you see some of these weird cults, now I'm getting into the Nexum cult that's been in the news. They've been exposing with Allison Mack and Keith Rainier. You might have heard that. And I guess there are some lower lieutenants. I'm trying to think, of course, the Brothmans, who are part of the Seagram alcohol family. And actually, you know, JFK's grandfather was a big prohibition involved in alcohol bootlegging. So a lot of these big families have a background in drugs or alcohol or other things. So, but anyway, this Nexium cult that's in the news that they're busting with the New York Attorney General, and he was branding the women, and the problem that the elite have was WikiLeaks and those emails. It just exposed too much human and child trafficking. And when they have something like that leak, they have to do damage control. So there has to be justice, and they're going to give up this Nexium cult, and they're going to give up probably Harvey Weinstein. He might get out after a few years. So they're going to give something to the masses. There has to be justice. And, you know, there are a lot of other people linked to the Nexium cult. You've got even Richard Branson. You've got Vicente Fox, former president of Mexico. So you'd be surprised how many big names were taking these executive success programs. You know, they were probably really expensive. It's not cheap if you want to brand a woman, you know. You're going to probably have to pay quite a bit for an executive success program. This, again, falls right in line with the Jesuits. Remember what I told you, how they were spreading the gospel but collecting the gold. The same mode of operandi. And so what I'm telling you is that the Jesuits don't just create religions as they did in the 17 and 1800s. They also create cults. And we'll probably find Jesuit links to the Brothman family and Seagram. And I haven't really spent any time looking at it. But in principle, again, it's the same M.O. We sell education, but we harvest the gold. And I'm telling you this because in the news, there was an article about a cult way worse than Nexium and has not been busted yet. And what is the name of that? I know they teach OM, which is an interesting acronym in itself. It's so, like, perverted, I'm not even going to cover their techniques since what OM is on this radio show. But you're going to want to search that out. Let's see. OM and the cult name. Let me see if we can find that for you. Is One Taste. There you go. One Taste. Now, you're going to want to search on One Taste. Founded in San Francisco. Now, we can assume there's going to be some connection to the Jesuits or to the Bohemian Grove north of San Francisco. So I haven't really dived deep into this. Maybe those are bad words. Let's see. I haven't looked further into researching this, but I'm going to guess One Taste, which has had big articles in major magazines and newspapers talking about the benefits of One Taste. Even the name sounds pretty perverted, but if you Google, well, don't use Google, use like DuckDuckGo and look for One Taste or the big OM, which is orgasmic meditation, the new craze, all right? But it's the same thing. You can take a One Taste course. That course might be $200, $500, $30,000, and you'll be educated in this religion, this new gospel of OM. And it's the same modus operandi of the Jesuits. Educate, but harvest the gold. And so, again, I suspect this is another cult that has been funded by Jesuit gold. And you see, they latch on to anything that gains traction, that starts to sign up members, books, and especially, again, in the religious, spiritual realm. That's how many of these new age organizations grow and become names. They have been funded. They haven't just grown like organically. And people love One Taste. No, they've been funded with marketing and promotions and millions of dollars to promote these twisted and perverted beliefs called religion or spirituality. And this particular one, of course, is for women's empowerment. It basically is a form of prostitution. Okay, you're going to have to look into it for yourself. One Taste. And so everyone is wondering, as the news on One Taste of San Francisco is building, will it go down? It's a little bit too blatant, just like Nexim cult and branding of women, and One Taste does other things to women that I can't mention on this show. Oh, and it's good for the women, of course, just like the branding was. So there's this whole issue of what they call women empowerment, also known as women's sexual abuse, but they call it women empowerment these days. And so there's a good chance here that this organization will go down next, because they're going to have to give us a few victories, some justice. And this one's pretty obvious. Of course, they made, $7 million off of their members buying education. So they're harvesting the gold, just selling education. It's the same modus operandi. I'll be back in just a minute because there's more to this story. I can't wait to tell you.
She says hello. In the sky, a graceful show. Many fall onto their knees. Moonlight dancing to be seen.
Music for the late night hour features the musical group Landia. The song is called Princess Diana Returns. To support the artist, purchase the full version of the song at iTunes.
You're listening to The Late Night Hour with Alex Abrams.
So as the powers start to provide justice to us, the little people, they have to publish their prosecution documents. In the NXIVM cult, those documents are starting to be released, and they have confiscated $500,000 in cash in shoe boxes found in one of the lieutenant's homes. And they'll confiscate that, and they have to talk about the Brofmans, I think they're billionaires or millionaires family, and they got caught up because they were funding NXIVM cult, and they probably not going to go any further, telling you the connections between the Brofmans and the Jesuits. So you see, they go so far in the story, but they don't complete the entire picture. They never link it up to the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. And that's where their Knights Templar agents come into play. They are the intelligence agencies. That's why they're in the mainstream media. And they're only going to go so far. They'll never expose the Jesuits and the Black Pope. That's their job. So you're going to have to dig for yourself. And I would probably start from the Brofmans. So with this One Taste organization in San Francisco, I think it's going to link up to celebrities again, because they all are after celebrities. They're after the big money people who can pay for the $30,000 women empowerment seminar. And one of the interesting aspects of this One Taste and their OM, orgasmic meditation, and the fact that women are abused, essentially, it made me think of another group, and that being Aleister Crowley, known as the most evil man in the world, a Satanist. And he had something called I'm trying to remember, what was that? Oh, yeah. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. You might have heard of that. And the reason this is important is because Dr. Crowley was, of course, practicing satanic rituals, which he called magic. And I noticed this One Taste OM had seminars they referred to as magic seminars. And so we see the link to Aleister Crowley. And Aleister Crowley was also initiated into something called the Ordo Templi Orientis, OTO. And it's interesting that this One Taste uses OM, and Aleister Crowley was OTO. So you see, they all have these slick little acronyms. But of course, Aleister Crowley founded the religion. Now, I wouldn't call it a religion, but I guess they do. The religion of Thelema, which is basically take hard drugs and sexually abuse women. So there you go. You have his secrets of Thelema. And so here again, we see this in one taste and OM. And I don't know if they're taking drugs while they're practicing their OM, but again, it's too perverted to tell you about, so you're going to have to look it up. One Taste and their OM, a modern-day version of Aleister Crowley's Order of the Golden Dawn, Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And there's still another level here you need to know about. Aleister Crowley believed that humanity was going into what's called a new eon, basically a new age of Aquarius. And the religion of Thelema is basically his tagline, do as thou wilt. So basically, do anything. There are no rules. There are no moralities. And this new eon, I guess, is now, because one taste and OM seems like there's no more rules. There's no moral compass. And certainly the traditional man-woman relationship is thrown out with one taste and OM, and that's what they call women empowerment. Or they try to convince the women, who are essentially sex slaves, they have to believe in women empowerment, become a sex slave, and pay us for the chorus. And, of course, those that abuse you have to pay for choruses. And so they make money from both ends. What a great scam. One taste. And I have high hopes they will take this organization down. But it all links back to Aleister Crowley and OTO and Order of the Golden Dawn. And so it's important you understand this, because you're going to ask, what is the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn? Well, they had 3 founders. Let's give them credit. William Robert Woodman, William Wynne Westcott, Samuel Liddell Mathers. All of them were Freemasons. And, the Freemason lodges were predominantly for men. And what they practice in the Freemason lodges at the high end, I don't know if I'd call it the high end, maybe those are bad words, at the upper regions of the Masonic lodges, you're probably turning into a Knights Templar who had 2 men riding 1 horse. I'll let you get the image there. But I think that's kind of the linkage here. So remember, the Knights Templars work for the Jesuits and the Society of Jesus. They hide behind Jesus while perverting the actual principles of Jesus. And the Knights Templars at the top of the Freemasonry hierarchy, also typically members of military intelligence, or not military intelligence, but intelligence. In this day and age, they're the MI6, CIA, they're at those kind of organizations. And so, who funded Aleister Crowley and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn? Well, the Freemasons, they founded the entire organization and funded Aleister Crowley. He was nobody, until he received the Jesuit funding. It all links up. And the Jesuit funding made the Order of the Golden Dawn grow. Now, why would these men, who were all Freemasons, why would they fund the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, who, of course, Aleister Crowley was heavily involved in? Because the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, they admitted women. Therein is the difference. The Freemasons did not have women members, but the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn did. And so, in their rituals, they could abuse women. So it's the same thing going on. They call it magic instead of sexual abuse. But you can believe in these same rituals, especially if Aleister Crowley was involved. There would be probably massive drugs and sexual abuse. And that's what Aleister Crowley was all about. Remember, do as thou wilt. There are no limits. There are no moral compass. And we just see this repeating. And so my point here is the Jesuits will fund everything in the spiritual spectrum, whether it be traditional religions, Catholicism, Islam, Christianity, Mormonism, or may it trickle over into the cults like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the Freemasons, NXIVM, One Taste. The signature and the fingerprints of Jesuit funding continues. And you learn that here on the new late night hour, trying to help you understand the big picture of what's going on. So tonight we talked mostly about the religious spectrum, how they want you to pick a religion. Well, they're working the same deal in the political spectrum. They want you to pick one of the political parties to join, and they fund most, if not all of them. And so I hear a lot on chat boards and forums and posts how George Soros funds the liberals. You'll hear this a lot. And Antifa, Black Lives Matter, the Open Society. But as I told you before, the Rothschild family sits above the Jesuit order. And Soros, you hear George Soros, he's just the American agent for the Rothschilds. And so he funds all political spectrums. What are you saying? I'm saying George Soros funds the Democrats and he funds the Republicans, including Trump. And your assignment after this show is simply to search George Soros loans Trump Incorporated $100 million. You see, Soros, the agent for Rothschild, funds all political parties. And so I really don't hold out a lot of hope that Trump is going to drain the swamp. Now, they're going to give us some low-level arrests and justice, like NXIVM, like Harvey Weinstein. They're going to pick and choose. But there's a lot more involved in human trafficking, abuse of women and children. There's a lot more and a lot big names. Today, they were talking about Tom Hanks, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, all of them links to some type of pedophilia parties. So there may be more of this coming out here. And remember, they're going to have to give us some names, some justice, so that they can not expose the top, so that the story ends there and doesn't keep going up and up to the Jesuits, to the Rothschilds. They're going to have to give up some of their lower-end operations, and that's kind of what you're seeing played out. And it'll be interesting to see what other persons or organizations they'll sacrifice in order to hide the true origin that is funding all of this human trafficking and pedophile activity. You see, they use all of this perversion in order to film and blackmail elected leaders so that the world continues down a path marching to the New World Order, which I believe will be headed by an AI, not a person at all. And the AI, of course, will be working for the same cabal that sits above the Jesuits. And I believe that is the plan. The plan will be to replace all elected officials with an AI. And that was pretty much documented in the theory of technocracy, which really just talks about having an AI run the world of tyranny, a dictatorship by the beast. Right out of the chapter of Revelations, breathing life into the beast, the AI that will eventually run the world. They'll use all of this corruption to justify the removal of the elections and electoral system. And we'll just let the benevolent AI run everything, and we will end the political corruption. But really, the AI is just a deeper form of political global corruption. And it's going to be such a tyrannical system that we must start today to understand this big picture and oppose any attempt to remove duly elected representation, or we will have truly taxation without representation. History repeats. And they made some mistakes by giving us slogans like that. No taxation without representation. Don't tread on us. America, the home of the free and the brave. In creating their national countries, they unfortunately gave us a few good slogans that are coming back to bite their attempts to destroy national sovereignty. And so it'll be up to you and I to oppose this. We've talked the last few days about the October surprise, and we have not seen anything major. If anything, the October surprise is this march of 50,000 immigrants from Guatemala to force the issue with Trump, to make Trump look foolish, to get him to say something extreme or racist against this 50,000 size mob. But Trump so far has not commented. Now, it doesn't matter if the Republicans or the Democrats are in power, but they still try to get into power at any cost. They're like the two henchmen of the global elite vying to run things. To you and I, it doesn't really matter if the Republicans or the Democrats run it. They're both corrupt. But they fight amongst themselves because they want to control their territory. And so you should listen to our previous few broadcasts on the October surprise because it's still October 23rd. So let's see. The election is, election is a couple weeks out. And so plenty of time for the October surprise. sometime between now and Wednesday, the October surprise may hit. I don't believe it is the immigrants marching. That's a counter October surprise. So we'll count down the days of October and look for something major to pop. Perhaps the release of documents, another WikiLeaks. Something is going to happen. And once it does, I'll be back on the air to talk to you. Hopefully in the next day or two, we'll hear something about the October surprise. Now, we also like to follow the QAnon situation. And that's probably partly why we're not broadcasting every day, as Q has been relatively quiet since October 9th. And I believe that's because he does not want to accidentally leak the October surprise. So Q has not posted since October 9th. So nothing new to inform you about Q tonight. But I'm expecting a big post from Q if this October surprise is launched. And so here we are on the 23rd. We've got 8 days left in October. And so tune in and keep checking back and see if an announcement is made in the next few days. And now it's time to switch off the power generator, put away the canned food, and close down the bunker. We hope you enjoyed our program and look forward to seeing you again on our next broadcast. Let's all stand together for a better world, a world of freedom and liberty.
You're listening to the Late Night Hour